We're also going to review the operation of the Extradition Act and the UK-US extradition treaty that flows from it, to make sure it works both ways and that it doesn't result in vulnerable British citizens being packed off to America for computer hacking. So our message is this: if you care about our liberties, if you want people to be free from the clutches of an overbearing state, and if you want a government with liberal values, vote Conservative. And now I introduce Caroline Spelman, who's going to talk about localism.
Well, morning, everyone. You've just heard Dominic explain how a Conservative government would protect the individual from the overmighty state. And real progressives understand we need to give people more power too. The sense that we control our own destiny is absolutely essential to the quality of life. But over the past 13 years, Labour have taken more and more power away from individuals, families and neighbourhoods. You don't like your local schools? Tough. You don't like the graffiti in your local park? Tough. You're angry that your local post office is closing down? Tough. You're furious that someone has decided to build a huge housing development on your doorstep? Tough. If we win this election, we are going to turn this top-down, power-hoarding, state-heavy system on its head and bring in a new age of people power. New schools set up by parents, charities and businesses. Police commissioners directly elected by local people. More power to local councils. More mayors to large cities. More control over housing, planning and energy to neighbourhoods. And today, we're announcing a new plan to give people more power over the look and shape and feel of the place where they live. We're going to help neighbourhoods create more parks and green spaces by giving them much more control over the planning system. And to fund these new parks and pay for things like playground equipment, we'll give local people access to some of the funds paid by developers to local councils, funded by some of the money from planning developments. It's going to mean communities coming together to make things happen, derelict spaces and ugly wastelands going green, new life being breathed into neighbourhoods. So our message is this: if you care about localism, if you want a radical power shift in our country away from big government and to individuals and communities, if you want progressive government, vote Conservative. Thank you. Now David is going to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you, team. Right, let's start with Bill from ITV.
Why on earth would any Liberal Democrat supporter, seeing how Nick Clegg is doing in the polls and within touching distance of what they've looked for a generation, a fairer system of voting, why would they switch to you? As the second question, you're, I gather, targeting Labour seats that were not originally on your top target list. Does this also mean that you are switching resources away from certain seats, for example, Richmond Park, where you think the game's up?
Well, to answer your last bit first, no, not at all. I mean, from here, I'm going to be going down, as well as going to Southampton, where we think there are Labour seats we can win that perhaps we weren't originally targeting. I'll also be going to Romsey, which obviously is a Lib Dem-held seat that we want to win. So we're enlarging our battleground. But the point I'd make is this, and this is a point I've made for 4.5 years when I became leader of this party, that if you have a view that we need to do more on our environment, more on civil liberties, more on the quality of life, there is now a modern Conservative Party that can get things done. And the key question at this election is, who's going to bring change? What can actually be done to deliver the change that people want? Now, if you vote Conservative, you know you'll get every single, word in here in terms of our Green Manifesto. You'll get all that done. If you vote for anyone else, you can't be certain of any change. You could easily wake up on May the 7th and find that the alternative, as it were, to voting blue and going green is turning brown. So, that is the point. If you want these changes, and you can see them in the modern Conservative Party, that's what attracted, I think, a number of people who had voted Lib Dem and Labour and even Green in the past to come into the modern Conservative Party. This is the way to get things done. James.
But if you're making a pitch for Lib Dem voters on the environment, on civil liberties, on local democracy, surely the best way of ensuring that you guys actually fulfil this is to have a Lib Dem party and a hung parliament at your elbow, keeping you honest, ensuring that you actually act on these things rather than just relying on your promises now.
Well, the manifesto is the clearest explanation of what you do. It's the document people can hold you to. Take one example. Let's take the Heathrow third runway. You know, if you get a Conservative government with a majority, you absolutely know the third runway won't go ahead. Now, any other outcome, who knows whether this would be traded, someone having this job or that budget or this change. The only way you can be certain of no third runway, the only way you can be certain of the Green Deal, the only way you can be certain of the changes we're making in terms of parks and public spaces and playgrounds is by voting Conservative. You know, you get what it says in the little blue book, a lot of which is extremely green. Gary Gibbon.
Gary Gibbon, Channel 4 News. You say who knows what's going to be traded. People might think you rather hope that you knew what you'd trade. Do you have a list of non-negotiables? And can I ask you, the Financial Times has presented us with a rather horrifying pie chart today of all the things that could be cut. The other side of the election curtain. Can you really say, hand on heart, that you think you've been honest with the voters about the pain the other side and you have a mandate to inflict it, when all you've really shared with them is a very small proportion of the cuts?
Well, let's deal with the second point first. I mean, the Conservatives have been very clear. We've said a public sector pay freeze for a year from 2011. We've said that people are going to have to retire a year later, starting with men in 2016. We've said which benefits we think should no longer go to better off couples. And I would say one of the proofs that these things are meaningful is that alongside all the complete lies on Labour leaflets, they do put these things there. So we have taken some pain by explaining some of the things that need to be done. And the other parties haven't done that. So I don't accept that we have been lacking in candour about this. I mean, of course, there is more that has to be done. I've said this many, many times. But I think from opposition, with a government that isn't setting out a 3-year spending review, without all the detailed knowledge and figures and the rest of it, actually to set out what you're going to do on pay, on pensions, on some benefits, I think is very significant. So that's the first thing there. On the issue of trading and deals and all the rest of it, look, we are aiming for a majority government. We believe that is doable, that's deliverable. That's why we've extended our battleground. That's why yesterday I was up in the northeast talking with candidates who you know, we now think have a real chance because of the complete collapse of the Labour vote. And what we want is in here. This is our programme. This is what we're putting in front of the British people, and that is what we want to get delivered. And we think there's every chance of doing that in the remaining 10 days of the campaign. Nick.
Nick Watt from The Guardian. This is obviously the Guardian wing of the Conservative Party love-bombing the Liberal Democrats, or Liberal Democrat voters, but obviously most Conservatives are not part of the Guardian wing, and they feel very, very strongly on things like retaining the first-past-the-post electoral system. Why can you not say to Conservatives that in the event of a hung parliament, you will not take part in any negotiations that involve putting first-past-the-post on the table?
Well, you've met the Guardian wing of the Conservatives. It'd be good now to meet the Conservative wing of the Guardian. That's the next challenge. Look, I mean, we're very where am I? The point is this. Look, we believe that the current system does need reform. We think all seats should be the same size. We don't think it's right that the Isle of Wight has got whatever it has now, 110,000 voters, and some seats have, you know, barely more than half that. So we do have a proposal for fair votes, which is to make every seat the same size right across the United Kingdom and to reduce the size of the House of Commons because it's, compare it with any other legislature in the world, apart from China, it really is very, very big. So those are proper electoral reform changes. But we do support the current system, and we want to stand by the current system because it delivers a really good link between constituency and MP, and also it's decisive. It enables the British public to throw a government out of office. And our fear is that you get rid of this system and you leave yourself with a system like many countries have on the continent where we all go off and vote and we all make our decisions and then we suddenly find actually the Prime Minister, the government, the policies, the programme, everything is decided by the politicians.